Alright everyone, welcome back to another revision video on my channel. Hope you're all doing well. It is still January here. We are in Tier 4, awaiting the new restrictions that could be coming out soon. But I hope you guys are all well, hope you're all doing okay. And today it's a highly requested video, which I know a lot of you have been asking for, and I am delivering as promptly as I can. And it is about chemistry and A-level GCSE chemistry. And I'm going to be going through 6 tips to get an A star on chemistry, which hopefully is something you guys are all aspiring to do, and hopefully should be a useful video for you guys. Since you've all asked for this, I'll be doing a revision video on maths as well, so those of you going for A-level maths or GCSE maths can also be doing that. Anyway, so chemistry, I'm going to go through quite a few tips on what I did and why I got an A star, how I got an A star despite not really enjoying the subject. So I'll be going through exactly what I did and how I did it. So tip number 1 is to revise effectively. Now, I know that this is a vague thing to say, but when you're revising chemistry, you know that chemistry is already split into quite useful topics. You've got inorganic chemistry and you've got organic chemistry at its very core. Now, a lot of people tend to find inorganic chemistry easier than organic chemistry just because it's simpler to understand. It's the periodic table, it's about elements, metals, non-metals, so it's not too difficult to get your head around. Now, what you should be doing when you're revising is spending, like on the UCAT, more time on subjects or parts of the subjects that you're less confident on. Now in chemistry, for me, that was organic chemistry, and in particular the second year organic chemistry, which got very complicated very quickly. So what I did is I would spend perhaps, when I'm revising, when I say revising I mean looking through notes, reading textbooks and all those things, I would spend about 70% of my time on those sections in chemistry, 30% of my time on stuff that I already knew, so things like inorganic chemistry, things like low 6 chemistry or year 12 chemistry, and so it wasn't too difficult in that sense, so I was able to balance my revision well, and I dedicated the time needed to understand subjects that I didn't quite understand. So I would really say that's an important thing, revise effectively. Awesome, so the next thing I would say for chemistry is to understand what you'll learn. For any A-level subject, I would say chemistry, this is the most important thing to do, because in chemistry you need a solid understanding to revise for an exam, for any exam really. Whether it's a topic test, whether it's a public exam, there's no way of being able to understand organic chemistry or inorganic chemistry without actually knowing what it is. So for example, the processes of polymerization, despite that probably being the easiest bit of organic chemistry, you need to understand it before actually applying it in a question. They could ask you something about, something simple about polymerization, for example, explain what polymerization is, and that's pretty easy, that's a 1 marker, 2 marker maybe, but then they can also ask you to say, when would polymerization be important in industry and why? So that's the application question, and you won't be able to answer application questions unless you understand the concept thoroughly. And those questions actually come up more often than you'd think, especially if you're doing higher tier papers. Chemistry is very much a life application subject, so they'll try and stay away from the chemistry, and they might start asking you a lot about experimental questions and life application questions. So you need to be confident answering those, and the only way of doing that is to be confident of the concept. So the next tip is give care to experimental questions and experimental topics. For me, I lost pretty much 90% of my marks in the paper from experimental questions because I was never good at that. And unfortunately in chemistry, 50% of the paper is probably going to be an experimental based question. And that's just the way chemistry is, that's the way they do it. So when you're in class and when you're doing experiments, pay attention. I can't stress this enough. Pay attention when you're doing experiments in class. These experiments that you do in class can come up in the exam, and they can carry a surprisingly high number of marks. So they could give you a 6 marker out of nowhere, talking about how to create an indicator solution, for example, or talking about how to measure a buffer solution. And that's something you're definitely going to do in class. If not, you'll at least have it in your textbook. So a lot of people make the big mistake of just ignoring experimental and practical questions. But when you start doing past papers, you'll realise, what, these questions, these experimental questions, they're coming up, quite a lot, actually even more than normal questions, because, the specification is changing towards a more practical based or practical orientated exam, just because, that's for those who are going to do chemistry at university, they're going to be using and handling real things, not just looking at textbooks. So they want you to talk about practical things, they want you to talk about real life scenarios, so please do pay attention to experiments, and please do revise the experiment. You know, those little boxes that you get, those coloured boxes, you know, which might have an experiment in it, people usually skip them out. Don't skip them out. Read it, learn it, understand it. It's so important, because they might just ask you to basically carry out an experiment, and if you've read that experiment in a textbook, that's the easy 6 marks for you. And for those who haven't done the practical questions, which I guarantee you is a significant proportion of those doing chemistry, GCSE or A level, you'll get 6 marks ahead of them, and you'll be at the top of the pack. That can really separate you from A to an A star, just learning and understanding practical questions. Now, I understand if that's not easy to understand. I've dotted a few practical questions up on the screen, and I'll try and make a document of a few practical questions, or at least link to a website which gives practical questions. But yeah, they're easy to access. There are textbooks online which specialise in practical questions, and there are websites online which have past papers only using practical questions. So do those, and please do them, because for me that was the hardest bit of chemistry. You know, understanding those questions that come up about practical scenarios. Look at questions that are repeating. Questions are always going to come up again and again and again. The areas they come up in are places that you should be revising and learning. Not the mark scheme, but understanding those questions. And there are particular places, and the place where questions repeat in chemistry is practical questions. As I said in my previous tip just now, you need to be revising practical chemistry, experiments. You need to be understanding practical experiments. Look at the formulas you need to learn. Now, formulas and units are incredibly important, because in chemistry they love giving you 5 mark calculations. So for example, this could be for calculating the concentration of a product, or they love those back titration problems that you get, and they're about 6, they can be 10 marks even, and they'll guide you through the question. But unfortunately for you, if you make a units error somewhere and it's not a guided question, for example, if it's just a blank 5 mark question that says, you know, calculate the concentration of this from these data, if you make 1 unit error, you lose all 5 marks, and that's unfortunate. So you need to learn your units and learn your formulas. So for example, when for mass, you know, learn, are you using kilograms or grams? For example, pressure, are you using pascals, kilopascals? For volume, centimeter cubed or decimeter cubed? Please learn these units, because what can happen is you can lose easy marks in an exam just through lack of awareness, because if you don't understand the units you're using and you don't apply those units correctly, you're going to lose very easy marks, and it's going to be a big problem, obviously. And you don't want that to happen, because you've learned this formula, and it'd be a real shame to just throw away 5 marks. So please do learn units as well as the formulas, so that you're ready for the exam. And the final tip I'd say is to understand the mark scheme. With chemistry, they can be very snickety about the words that you use. So amount, for example, is not a good word to use in a chemistry paper. It belongs nowhere in A level or GCSE. You should be using volume or mass or number even, because these words are very vague, and if a chemistry marker picks up on that, they can dock you marks instantly. They want to see you using words or phrases that are chemically correct, or that you could see in a mark scheme. So make sure you're using the right terms, because even if you have the right idea or an answer, you can lose 2-3 marks just by using the wrong words. So how would you revise that? Well, go to a mark scheme, go to any examiner's report from previous years, look at similar questions and look at the mark scheme, look at what phrasing they've used, look at what words they've used, and try and replicate that through your own answers by, you know, repeating it. Read the answer, understand it, add it to your flashcards, add it to your notes, add it to your note bank, whatever you're using to revise. Make sure you're always aware of the correct phrasing. So whether it's writing a flashcard, on your answer side of the flashcard, make sure you've got the right phrasing, so you're learning the right way to answer the question as well as the right concept. So for example, if it's something about how to measure out the mass of a compound using a top-down balance, make sure you're using the correct wording, so you're using mass, not amount, of a substance. And that can help you get a lot of marks, surprisingly, because the way chemistry mark schemes are set out, unfortunately, it's a lot more about the way you write something than the way you think, because it's not an interview. They don't know what you're thinking, they only know what you put down on the paper. So if you put the right words down and the right phrasing down, you'll definitely get the marks. Anyway, that's everything, so hopefully you found that useful. Now, if you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Contact me on Instagram, follow me on there. I'll be releasing the releases of any new videos on there, so you can keep up to date with my revision or medical application videos. And yeah, if you've got any other questions about this video or want to see any particular videos in the future, drop them all in the comments below, and smash the subscribe button, the like button, and yeah, see you in the next video. Peace.